We're joined once again by clinical psychologist Clint Maggott, who will be discussing practical coping strategies that men can use to improve their mental well-being. Thank you for joining us again, Clint.
Thank you.
So what are these practical strategies that men can put in place slowly but surely, baby steps, to make sure that they begin to open up and feel comfortable opening up?
So typically men, in terms of opening up, in terms of that aspect, I think often men need to be able to hold space for each other, as well as women and the people in their lives, to hold space for them not to be strong.
Yes.
So
for vulnerability.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I remember like being at a braai, standing around, somebody was turning meat, and one of the guys said, you know, it's really difficult to stay connected to your wife after being in a long-term relationship. And I was like, what?
Huh?
Yeah, it's like not a rugby score, not about soccer.
Yes.
And it was a very interesting space. Like people opened up and they said, yeah, that is actually something I struggle with. That's something I think about. And often all that's really needed as a start is just to kind of start conversations with people and to model it. So to actually be different as a guy, and for others then to support that and not reject it or criticize it or make fun of it too much. Yeah.
Yes. Do you do that intentionally? I mean, I know that you're a psychologist and it's part of who you are and your skill set, but is that something you intentionally do, that you seek out when you are in a social environment to go and ask someone those, you know?
I do. I try not to do it in an annoying way, right? I mean, I think it could come off a little bit like, you know, you're trying a bit too hard. So often what guys need, I think, is...
But why would a man feel that? Because I love when I'm asked how I'm feeling, or...
I think most guys, if you ask them how they're feeling, like, fine, I'm okay. I think it's like when you're pushing for kind of depth, you often need a bit of humor.
Yes.
You need
an icebreaker.
You need an icebreaker. You need to make it okay. And often with guys, we need to do it doing another activity.
Yes. So with Brian.
Yeah. So the conversation's much easier. Tell me about how you're feeling as we turn that steak. We're not just like sitting and looking at each other.
Yes.
Yeah. If you you know, you're playing pool together, you're doing a run.
Yes.
And it's in those spaces that you have these kind of little points of being able to be honest with each other.
Yes. So give me a framework of where someone can start. In terms of like coping strategies for mental health.
So with guys, I mean, as much as I'm kind of saying that, you know, often men are too defined by power and strength, it is something that makes men feel better. And so often a guy, you know, engaging in his body, so exercise, to be honest, sex, to be honest, kind of, you know, getting a haircut, engaging in their physical selves, you know, a little bit of competition, sport and play. It's really restoring to men. Often then initially just going into the more kind of deeper stuff.
Yes.
And then typically for most guys, there's a few friends that you have, sometimes just one, that you can really show yourself at your kind of weakest and just be kind of like open and vulnerable about that. So that's the one for me.
So men should be encouraged to do more of that.
So definitely opening up a lot more, kind of starting those conversations. Like I say, often it's needed with humor and activity, but definitely go there. And then as well with their partners, I think that's a great space to kind of try. And then the other one for me would be this kind of physical outlet, which is often to help them be strong. They're going to need to both themselves also accept that they don't always have to be strong. You know, so the two roles that is typically prized by men is protector and provider. Yeah. And sometimes you can't do those things. Yeah. And sometimes you can't be strong. And it should be okay. Yes. You know, guys are often afraid that if I go there, I'm going to get stuck there. And you actually won't. And then the other thing for me is, if you know, I've tried all these things and I'm still struggling, typically you're going to need to reach out for help. Often there's assumption that it's going to cost too much.
And the stigma.
And the stigma around it.
We talk about the stigma. How do we diffuse that?
I think the stigma often, it really comes from sharing it. You know, I've had lots of experiences where people say, oh, I mentioned that I'm going to therapy. And then surprisingly, like 2 other guys were like, oh yeah, I've been going for years, you know. And so this kind of, this daringness, this kind of boldness to actually say
to normalize
that you're struggling and to normalize it. And you'd be surprised that you're really actually not alone.
From a woman's perspective, if you are in a situation where this comes easy to you, but you're with a partner that is quite closed off and, you know, emotionally stunted, doesn't easily emote, how can you encourage him to open up without the shame and the stigma and the guilt? Where does a woman start to build that safe space with her man that has usually come across as strong and empowered?
So there's an aspect to it where I think women need to, or could help. For one, by kind of saying that themselves that they struggle and this is what they do, to kind of try and tell the guy that it's okay to kind of be vulnerable. I still admire you. I still love you. And so to offer some degrees of reassurance. Often you may need to direct a guy to a doctor as a first point of call. Sometimes a therapist is almost like a little bit of a step too far to kind of say, I think you need to go to therapy. I mean, almost kind of respond to it with a little bit of shame and criticism often initially. And so sometimes a doctor is a good point of call and then they tend to refer. But for me, with women, it's about offering some forms of reassurance to model that again to them and to kind of make it okay and to show them that they still find that person attractive. They still see them as their man, even though they can show those aspects of themselves.
So to normalize when things are going wrong. So you've lost your job. It doesn't mean I love you less.
No.
Clinton, thank you so much. It's always wonderful having you on Afternoon Express, and we value all these pearls of wisdom that you bring to the show.
My pleasure.
Remember that we are all on this journey together and that the men in our lives need our support too. Coming up next, we will hear how Dr. Anza Shipatane shapes bright young leaders in South Africa.